care and what kind of doctors they need to see, what kind of specialists we have access to. The company that I work for in particular, they are what we call an all-encompassing long-term care. So they handle everything. From transportation, we will go and pick up our people, bring them to the center that they go to because it's all based off of where they live. And then they receive whatever services they need, whether that's, just a regular checkup, a therapist. They even do day activities, get them, moving, get our friends going for the day. Because as you get older, it's definitely a lot harder to socialize. So that's kind of what I do. It's definitely a lot of people, a lot of communication, and a lot of computer for sure.
All right, awesome. And just so you know, we're in northern New Jersey. What area are you in, just so we know?
I am in Colorado.
Okay, all right. So this is a nice stretch of time. It's early in the morning for you, huh?
Very.
All right, so our first question comes from Bailey. Bailey, go ahead.
What is your favorite part of your job?
Oh, that's hard. I like meeting a lot of different people from different backgrounds. Everybody's story is so unique. So I really like that. And I really like that I'm able to help people every day, making sure that they have the care that they need. And that's really important as you get older. Our older people don't have a lot of advocacy. They don't get anybody to really, step up for them unless they have really invasive family. A lot of people don't. So I really enjoy being able to step up for them and really stand up for them and let them know, this is what we need for you.
All right, Marika, go ahead.
What does a typical day look like when you're working?
Ooh, so it kind of changes. That's also one of the things I love about my job is it changes pretty often. I mean, if you want to talk about everyday tasks, obviously I meet with people every day. I work on my computer every day, but each day is kind of different as far as how I meet these people, what my schedule looks like. Some days I can hop on to my computer at 6 a.m. and I'm on until 9 p.m. Other days I am on at 8:30 and I'm gone by 3:30 because I'm tired or I need a nap or something. But other than that, every day is pretty much just driving to meet people, or because of COVID, it's turned a little more virtual. It's very difficult to do that with people who don't have access to technology. So we have to be really safe in what we do, and masks are super important. We're wearing those all the time, and just our protection and our gear. So a lot of out in the community. That's kind of what my day-to-day looks like, just driving around and hopping on the computer in between.
Awesome. All right, Emily Hill, go ahead. Just double check that she got in here okay. All right, we're going to skip her and go on down to Sebastian.
How important would it be to have a background in math, say, or so forth?
So for my job in particular, it's really not invasive. I'm not very good at math. So, as long as you know how to add, subtract, and look at, fractions or decimals, you can do fairly well in my position. I know as I progress through this, I will definitely need more experience in the math field, which I'm not excited about because I also do not like math, like I mentioned. So you don't need a whole lot, just your basics, but definitely as you progress through, especially through healthcare, math becomes more important the higher you go.
Okay, Nate, go ahead.
What are the different skills needed to be a good financial determination specialist?
You have to be flexible. You have to be able to just kind of roll with things as they come. Another thing that I always tell people is you have to have some type of grit. This is not an easy job. It's sometimes when you're looking at it on paper, it looks like a pretty easy breezy job, but it can be very stressful. especially when you're dealing with, in my circumstance, I'm dealing with people who may have dementia, mental health issues, they have Alzheimer's, they can't remember, they get angry because they can't remember, so you have to be able to be flexible and understanding of people. Another thing I would say is you have to be able to work in a team. This is not a just me type of deal. I work with tons and tons of different people. You have to be able to communicate, and that's on all platforms. That's not just talking face to face. That's over email. I text my coworkers, being able to sit down, like when I'm at home, I Skype chat a lot. So being able to communicate in a way that everybody understands is super important. And I would say the other thing that would make a good specialist, you got to take care of yourself. If you're letting this job burn you out, you're not going to be able to make the impact that you want. So you have to make sure that you have a lot of good self-care options. You know how to take a break, how to distance yourself from a work day. So that's super, super important.
Okay, our next question is from Arjvi. Go ahead, Arjvi.
What are the educational requirements for your job and how many years of college residence?
So for me, I actually am in college now. So you don't need a degree for what I do, but you do need at least 2 years of relevant experience in the healthcare field. So that could, honestly, you could just be working at a hospital in the front desk. A lot of this is trainable work. So I used to work for human services before I started working for this company, and I did the same exact thing. So that was translatable over to this job, and I worked there for almost 5 years. So at least having at least 2 years of relevant healthcare experience is going to put you in a good position. They recommend you have a bachelor's degree, but it's not necessary.
Okay, we're going to skip to the next question. Paige, go ahead.
What interested you most about being the financial determination specialist?
I'm sorry, one more time.
What interested you most about your job?
Oh, I would honestly say I like challenge. I'm someone who loves to be challenged, and I felt like this job would definitely challenge me every day. So that's kind of what drew me to it. Another thing that really drew me to this company in particular was that it was voted one of the best places to work, and I really wanted to know what that meant. And I can agree. I understand now why it is voted one of the best places to work in Colorado. But that also was super intriguing to me because that's not something that you hear very often. And another thing that interests me with this job in particular was the clientele that they serve. It's very interesting going into, like, for my interview, and they had asked how comfortable I was, with kids who have disabilities, or how comfortable I was with, elderly who have disabilities, because I kind of work with both. We get both type of people who come in and ask for help. So that's kind of another thing that really interested me, was the clientele and demographic that we serve.
All right, Emily Hill. You can go ahead when you're ready, Emily. I'm hoping that you can hear okay.
Yeah, I can hear. My question is, do you have to communicate or negotiate with insurance providers often?
Oh, yes. Yes, we do. We have a process put in place where we try to keep the lines of communication open with our Medicaid departments, which is the state health insurance. We work with a lot of veterans, so we do work with like Veteran Affairs and private insurances as well, which can be a little tricky. They talk about using state help quite a bit in my job. So we do that quite a bit. But we negotiate, I would say, probably almost every day. At least one of our teams is on the phone, talking to them, figuring something out, what's covered, what's not. Because as you get older and you start learning about healthcare and insurance, not everything is covered. So you start to learn about, the value of the dollar in healthcare and the value of an insurance in healthcare, which can be pretty scary, honestly. It scares a lot of people to realize that they pay $300-400 a month and they don't even get, doctor's appointments attached to it, and they still have to pay for those things, let alone having a place where they can go to see a certain type of specialist where that could cost someone thousands of dollars just to have an appointment.
Yeah, that's actually your question and answer is perfect timing for one of the units that we just covered, which is all about like healthcare economics and how insurance companies works and those negotiations. So it's perfect how it turned up. All right, Kylie, why don't you go ahead? I don't see her in here. I thought she joined before. So we're going to skip over her and we'll go on to Nicole. Go ahead, Nicole.
My question is, do you ever encounter any language barriers while trying to help someone?
Frequently, yes. The biggest one is actually ASL. That's one that we definitely see quite a bit. Sign language is far and in between that you'll find someone who specializes in it. For other languages, like, I've worked with people who speak Russian, people who speak Mandarin, people who speak Portuguese. So what we have is a language line we just call, and we are able to translate that way. I speak Spanish, so I'm able to work with my Spanish community. But other than that, we have a language line. The only one that is very difficult to have is that sign language. And obviously, with the people that I serve, not everybody has great hearing, or they're already deaf. So there's a big need for people who can do sign language. And I know for our company in particular, if you are able to sign, it raises your pay by at least $5, which is a pretty big deal.
That's awesome. And you're the second person we talked to, an interpreter who was kind of saying the same thing, that ASL is one of the high need
Yes.
translators. All right. Jennifer, go ahead.
What is the typical age range of like customers you work with?
So the typical range I work with are people between 55 and 100. And I have had experiences where we work with kids. So we're talking like maybe 15 to 25. And these kids have like serious disabilities. They have some serious afflictions going on. So otherwise, that's kind of the age range we work with. I just met with a woman not that long ago, and she is almost 102. So we kind of see everybody.
That is a big range. Jenna, go ahead.
How do you deal with stressful situations in your job?
I guess everyday stressors, you kind of have to pick and choose what you take on and carry with you. As far as like workplace stress, because that is something that does happen, whether that's conflict with your boss or coworkers or, just in general. The way that I like to de-stress and handle stress, I like to color. So I will color and take a break. It's super important, like I said, to be able to have that self-care. And it's really important to take days off. I think that that's something that not everybody really does. I would work long days and for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And then I take a day off just to kind of do what I want for that day, whether that's lounging around. Sometimes I just hang out with my dogs. It's really important to take those mental breaks, but that's kind of what I do to handle stress. I really try not to bring it home. Sometimes these cases that I work with are very disheartening, and it's almost like, how do I help them? And you want to work on it all day, all night, just to help someone get where they need to be. So that's kind of the hardest part about it, is not bringing it home and not stressing myself out at home, because I do bring my laptop home. So it's hard for me not to just be like, okay, let me go ahead and I'll just look at it right now. And then next thing you know, I'm like, it's 1 a.m. What am I doing? So being able to stop when I come home, that's, I think, the biggest de-stressor for me, is to just be able to just cut it out, put it away. Like I said, I go to school, so I use my laptop for both work and school. Sometimes when I'm on for school, I'll see an email come up and it takes everything in me not to look at it. But I know I have to not stress about it, because school is already stressful, and then you throw on the work stuff, and then I'm doing both things at the same time. So I'm not giving my 100% effort to either of them. But yeah, I would say that's kind of how I handle stress, just making sure I have the de-stressing tools that I need, and taking a day off. It's okay to take a day off.
All right, awesome. We have like 9 more questions. So if there's any stories that come to mind when you're answering our questions that you can share, because I know you have to be HIPAA compliant.
Yes.
But if you have anything that you can share, that we're very interested in your personal experiences. So
Sure.
Feel free to dive into those. We have time. So our next question is coming from Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Has this always been your first career choice, or did you have others in mind?
Oh goodness, no. When I first started high school, I really wanted to be a veterinarian, and I was like, I love animals. This is what I want to do. And then we got into like dissection, and I realized I didn't want to do that because it really grosses me out. So I had to pivot very quickly away from that and get something different. And then I was like, well, I like to argue and debate, so let's be a lawyer, right? Because that's what lawyers do all day long. So I was, really interested in it. And, I like Law and Order. It's the same thing, right? It's a TV show, so it's obviously real. So I was really interested in being a lawyer. And then I looked at how many years it would have taken me to be a lawyer. And at that point in my life, I definitely was like, that's too much. I don't want to be in school for the next 10 years. So that was kind of the deterrent for me. At one point, I wanted to enlist in the Army, and I wanted to be a defense artillery officer. So that was a big change in direction for me. But what I realized as I was looking through all the career choices that I kind of wanted is that there was the same thing of helping. So I knew as long as I had a career in which I could help people, or even animals, like I said, I love animals, I would be fulfilled in whatever I picked. When I graduated from high school, I played basketball my whole life, and I had a scholarship to play. Ended up not being able to because I hurt myself, which was not a good thing, which I'm able to just kind of mess around and play basketball now. I also come from a really big family. I am one of 8 kids. So my mom has 8 kids, and I was the first to go to college and really kind of get myself together in that aspect. So there was kind of a lot of pressure on me to pick a good field. What I've decided and what I'm going to school for now is sociology, which is pretty much the study of humans and society. And I emphasized on that public speaking, which is kind of how I got involved doing stuff like this. It's just a really good practice, and it's a good way to engage with communities that I otherwise wouldn't be able to engage with. I mean, you guys are in Jersey. I don't just find myself in Jersey, every day. So I have visited. I stood in Jersey a few years ago, and it is actually a wonderful place, and you guys have wonderful food, which I miss dearly because they do not have the same type of food here in Colorado. But yeah, I've had a lot of different changes. You know, it's very different. Like my fiance is very content with the job he has, and I'm like, this isn't what I want to do forever. I want to, be more in the community doing kind of what I'm doing now, just talking to students about the importance of whatever it is that I'm doing. I really want to work for a nonprofit and just get out there and be part of the vulnerable communities, people who are poor, people who don't have access to things, which is what I do now, but I want to do it in a sense where I actually am reaching more kids and teenagers and that kind of area.
Is the company that you work for now a nonprofit or government?
No, we are a for-profit company. So the craziest thing is that we actually just put ourselves onto the NASDAQ, which I don't know if any of you guys know what that is, but it's just the stock market. Basically, people can buy shares into this company. This company is not just Colorado based. We have locations in California, New Mexico, Virginia, North Carolina, and they're expanding. It's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's, I guess, the good thing is if I ever decided to leave Colorado, which I don't plan on anytime soon, I have options to go to other places, that have the same business there. But like I said, this isn't what I want to do forever. So just until I'm done with school.
Okay, awesome. And the area that you work in, do you work in more of a urban or suburban kind of area or rural?
Oh, I kind of go everywhere. At one point in time, I was working in Denver, which is the city, that's the main city. And we were working with like the long-term care facilities, and some of those facilities in Denver are really run down. They're really old. And then I work with people in like Loveland, which is our ski area. Like it's closer to Mountain Town more, and they have people with a lot of money and a lot of resources. So I've kind of been all over the place and with what I've done.
All right. Rav, go ahead.
How do you ensure that all of the people you work for have proper insurance and access to healthcare providers?
So the way that our process works, after they see me and after we get them approved for whatever program that they have, we set them up with a case manager. That's like every day they talk to them, they reach out to them if they have an issue with a doctor or if they're having any type of issue at all, really. That can be from the doctor to housing to transportation. So that's how we ensure that everybody has what they need. I'm more of like that beginning process of getting them in the door. And then we basically pass the long-term portion over to a caseworker. So the caseworker can work with them on an everyday basis and be in communication with them. Now, of course, if something changes or say, for example, I had this happen just recently. We had someone who had zero money, literally zero money. They really needed help. And then their mom had died and left them like a lot of money, almost like $1 million worth of assets we're talking. So to have zero money and then to have all this other money, it does change what you qualify for, especially when you're using state programs. Almost all, I'm going to say all state programs are income based, is how much money you make a year. So we had to bring it back to me and say, this is what happened. This is how much money they have now. What do we do? So there are instances where they have to come back to me, even though I'm technically the beginning process. There are instances where, yes, they have to come back, and then we have to go through it all again and then ensure that they have the correct insurance. So it's not just a one and done deal. There are definitely circumstances where we have to consistently keep looking at things together. But there's a big flow with how we do it. It's me, someone else takes over for the rest of the time that they're involved.
I just want to add on to that question. What kind of background does the caseworker have? Like, what kind of educational background are they? Are they social workers usually?
Yes and no. A lot of them are actually certified in nursing. A lot of them are nursings, and it's just because of the demographic. Some of them are caseworkers and social workers that require that 4-year degree. We've had therapists come in and do this job. And of course, obviously you need a degree for that. There are certain licensings that you need just specifically for the state of Colorado that I know that they have to obtain. The biggest one I would say that people need here is just that licensing for social work. It's really difficult to obtain if you're not in a degree program. So you have to make sure that if that's what you want to do, you have to have that 4 years.
Got it. All right, Caitlin Doricio, go ahead.
My question is, what is one experience that will stick with you for the rest of your life?
Does it have to pertain to this specific job? Because I used to work for human services before this, and I feel like that was more my life altering experiences. I did the exact same thing. But there I only worked with children. So it was definitely a lot different than what I do now. I guess for this position, I could give an example for both, but for this position in particular, I would say an experience that I will never forget is just my transition, because I went over into this company right when COVID happened. So I have never met my boss in person. I have never met any of my coworkers in person except for like maybe 3 or 4. It's a very different life now that COVID is here. I haven't even been inside of our building. I don't know what our building looks like. I can't even tell you where really it is because I've never been there. I know the general area, but a lot of what I do now is from home or from a direct center because they're allowed to stay open. But like where I'm technically supposed to work, I've never been. And it's really interesting for me when people are like, oh, how's your job going or whatever? How's this relationship with your boss? And I've never met them other than how we're talking right now, a phone or through a screen. And I've never met them otherwise. And I have been with this company for over a year now.
All right. Do you want to tell us your other experience? As long as it's healthcare related, we're interested in it.
Oh, yes. So when I worked for human services, like I said, I did work with kids. And I worked specifically with kids who had life-limiting illnesses. And I made sure that they had health care so they can obviously get the care that they need. So I had a family come in and they had a 5-year-old daughter. And she had been diagnosed with leukemia, so she had a very short lifespan ahead of her. And she was so full of life, even though she was sick, she was so full of life. We were able to get all of her stuff figured out and get her health insurance. The craziest thing about that situation is that her parents were immigrants, so they didn't have, you're not allowed to have state health care insurance unless you were born in the US or you have been what's called a legal permanent resident for 7 years. So even though you come here and you have papers, that doesn't qualify you immediately for any type of help. There are rules behind that. So you have to be in Colorado, at least here for 7 years before you're allowed to have any type of help. So they were really stressed out and worried. She was born here, but that's a big stressor. That's something that they didn't understand if she would be able to have or not. And she actually ends up beating her leukemia. And this was 3 years ago. So she's about 8 or 9 now. But right before I left my job, they came in and visited me. And working with kids, I created a lot of good relationships with parents. So they constantly were updating me, and some of them were good updates, some were not. But this one in particular just to come back and be grateful and say thank you, and that, you know, she was in remission and things were going really well for her. And I mean, just at 5, I couldn't imagine going through something so scary and then not knowing, are you going to have tens, thousands, hundreds and thousands of dollars in medical debt? Because that's really what a lot of the community I work with faces every day. They don't go to a doctor because they are afraid of that medical debt. They will literally keep themselves at home knowing they're sick or knowing that they need this or that simply because of the cost. So to have someone like me who can tell them these are their options is far and in between, and someone who does it without wanting them to basically sales pitch someone something. You know, I'm not trying to sell them anything. It's just, how can I help you in a way that benefits you? So that was one instance that will stay with me forever, just because they were so grateful. And working with them, I worked with them for a month to get everything straightened out. It was awful. I brought it home. I cried to my fiance. I'm like, I don't know how parents deal with sick children. I don't have any idea how parents can deal with a child that's sick like that. But it's good to see that other side. It's not always doom and gloom, you know. Sometimes kids get better. I'm sensitive, just even like with my dogs. So I couldn't even imagine a child. My dogs step on something and they're like my paw. And I'm like, oh my gosh, no, my babies. But, you know, with kids, I could only imagine it's a million times heightened. And I do come from a big family. So growing up, like, I'm sure it was scary for my mom. Like, when I was a kid, I got pushed through a glass window by my little brother. And I had a shard of glass about this big in my back. And she was freaking out. And I'm like, I don't even feel it. It's fine. Stop freaking out. And then when we went to the doctor, she rushed me to the hospital and they were like, yeah, you were like this close to being paralyzed with that shard in your back. If it had just angled itself just a little different, I would have been paralyzed from the waist down. So imagine, as a parent, it's probably a lot. So I really enjoyed working with parents, just being able to unburden them in some sense.
Do you think that family with the daughter with leukemia would have sought help, or would they have been keeping her from help because they weren't able to afford it?
Yeah, so actually they had kept her from seeing a doctor for a long time. They knew that something was wrong. One, because they were illegal, they were terrified to go to a doctor. But two, yeah, that medical debt scared the hell out of them. I mean, I could not even, the numbers that they were bringing to me from the hospital, you know, and hospitals, they're very sensitive about what's going on, but they also do need to get paid. That's the one thing that for sure, it's a touchy place with hospitals. You know, it's like, yes, we can do all these things and help you, but someone has to pay for it. These are not, you know, simple procedures that she was needing. She needed chemotherapy, she needed surgeries. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's just equipment. They got to pay their doctors and their nursing staff and everything else too. So they had kept her from the doctor for a year. They knew something was wrong for a year. And finally, someone had, so when I worked for Human Services, we had like resource fairs and stuff. So I think someone had been there and they said someone had told them that there was help here. And when you work for Human Services, you cannot discriminate. There's no discrimination, period, for any protected class and illegal immigrants. You cannot be discriminatory in any way. Our job is simply to help whoever comes through the door and asks for help. So for them, I had to kind of just lay down our rules and stuff. And yeah, I don't think they would have ever taken her to a doctor, or if they did, it would have been, you know, a clinic where they wouldn't have been able to give her the proper care or the diagnosis she probably needed.
That's incredible. Daya, go ahead. I think it's more personal. You might have to clarify your question a little bit, Daya. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it might be a little personal, but I'm just gonna say it.
So, what is your top specific financial goal that you want to accomplish in 2021?
Ooh, my top financial goal. I would say my top financial goal would be, if you would have asked me this last year, I would have said bought a house, but I did that last year. So I'm trying to think about, a lot of what I'm doing right now is saving for my wedding. So I would like to have at least, a good chunk of change put away for my honeymoon. We're going to Guam for our honeymoon, which my fiance is from Guam. He is this ginormous islander, and he's towers me, and it's just hilarious. But that's something that I definitely want to have money put away for. Flying to Guam is very expensive. The flight alone is about $1,500 a person. And that's because the way that the route goes, you have to fly through Japan. You go through and you could fly to Hawaii as well, but then you have to take a boat and I will get seasick. So we're not doing that. We're going to go through Japan, and then Japan will take you on a really tiny little uncharted plane over to Guam. So it'll be a long affair to get over to Guam. But yeah, that's my biggest financial goal, is to be able to do that. Oh, and to also save enough for vet bills. I don't have any kids, but I do have 2 dogs, and they are very clumsy. Dogs require a lot of work when they're clumsy like that. So vet bills can be super expensive, just like medical bills. So I'm trying to put away enough money to pay for, they have what's called pet insurance for a whole year, and just making sure they're covered for a whole year. I don't have to worry if they need to go in for an appointment, because they are just monsters and like to eat things they're not supposed to, and dig, and definitely they're bad boys and like to do bad things. One of them just ate a sprinkler. So they have like stomachs of steel. I don't know what's wrong with these 2.
It's definitely interesting, though. Maybe you need to go back into the vet business.
I'm thinking about it at this point. They're so expensive. One of them, so I have 2 rescues. One's name is Rocket, and he just stared at me because I said his name. And he is a pit bull mix, but he's tiny. He's so tiny. I think he might have been mixed with Chihuahua because he's so small, but his head is ginormous. And then I have another rescue, and they had told us he was a pit bull, but we found out through a DNA test, you can actually do DNA tests on your dogs, that he's what's called a blackmouth cur. And those dogs were specifically bred for hunting in the South. So Alabama, Tennessee, those type of places, they bred these dogs to help them as they were hunting. So he absolutely hates bunnies, and he does not like squirrels, and they know that, so they tease him. I have this huge tree in my backyard, and you'll see just squirrels jump from it all day long, and he is like super angry at everything that moves from that tree. But I'm surprised they're not in my face. They're normally trying to be in my face right about now. But I think they're pretty tired. They look tired to me. You guys tired? They look tired.
All right. Well, feel free to put them on camera if they want to make a cameo. Stephanie, go ahead.
Hi. So my question is, since you're not a nonprofit, where does your money come from?
Oh, so our money essentially comes from the hospitals and other providers. Because we're privatized, technically, we get a portion of money from hospitals just for us to stay afloat. And that was also something that was talked about because of COVID. Hospitals are a little, lean on money now. So there's a lot of cuts being talked about and different things like that. So that was also, I think, a progressive move as to why we invested ourselves into the stock market. So then we have that money that's coming in from people buying in our stocks and stuff. So that's also where we get money. We get money from insurances. That's a big payout for us, is through insurance, because like I said, we do provide a lot of services. It's all encompassing. So yeah, we kind of get paid from any and everywhere.
All right. Jagger, go ahead.
Okay. So my question is, what is one of the most important takeaways or a valuable lesson you have learned from your career so far?
Ooh. I would say, as far as like who I serve, you just have to be sensitive of everybody. You know, that's the biggest takeaway. Growing up, I feel like you're instilled with certain ideologies about people, and you have to wipe those things clean. You have to go in with no bias, no anything when you go into a situation. When I tell people that I work with vulnerable communities, and I tell them I work with people who don't have a lot of money, I get a lot of funny looks because it's not a demographic a lot of people like to work with. So it's definitely something I've learned, is that I have to go in with an open mind and with no preconceptions in any situation. As far as like my work relationships, because I think this is important, and I don't feel like this was talked about a lot when I was growing up, was you're not going to like everybody you work with. And that's okay. As long as you're able to have the same goal and work together respectfully, that's important. You're definitely not going to like everybody, and that's okay. You're not supposed to technically like everybody. It's a job. It just makes things a lot easier when you like who you're working with. But when you're passionate about what you believe and who you're serving, it shouldn't matter. I don't get along with everybody that I work with. And that's just because my personality is not for everybody, and some personalities just don't mesh well with mine. But we still can work with each other in a consistent and cohesive manner and be respectful. So just know that as you go forward and you start to work in environments, there's always going to be someone that you don't mesh well with, and that's okay. Just make sure you know how to work together.
I feel like that's a lesson that teachers always try to drive home whenever we have group projects. But it's always like, but I'll be done with school soon, you know? Like, we just have so many more years, then we're done with school and no more group projects. And it's like, I'm sorry, but you always have to deal with other humans, and there's always going to be somebody who gets under your skin.
Yeah. I don't like to be micromanaged, and I like to be able to do my own thing. And there are some people who I work with who are very micromanaging. So you have to learn how to communicate with each other. And yeah, you're just not going to like everybody you work with, and that's okay.
All right. Liba, go ahead.
So, my question was there anyone ever who denied financial aid? And if so, do you do anything to change their mind?
Yeah, it's definitely a touchy subject when you talk about financials. Some people don't like to accept help because they're prideful. We get that all the time. Oh, I don't need your help. I'm okay. We see it a lot with people who have like Alzheimer's or dementia. They know that they're all there. They think they're all there, so they don't need anybody to help them. And with the older generations, I would also say that it's just something with how they grew up. They don't like to ask for help. So we get denied all the time about help, even though like I had a case where the son was, you know, like, I know he needs help. There's no way I can do it. I live in another state. He refuses to move. So I had to try to convince his dad to be a part of the program. And it was time after time, it was just slamming the door in my face. Like, no, I don't want it. No, I don't want it. And sometimes you have to leave it alone for a while and then revisit. Or you have to approach it differently. In that instance with him, I had to leave it alone for a good month. And then after a month, I went back and approached it differently. Sometimes when people hear like Medicaid, which is the state program, or they hear, caseworker, social worker, it freaks them out. They don't understand 100% what that means. But the stigma behind it, the ideologies behind, I don't need Medicaid, I'm not poor. That's not necessarily what it means. So they don't want to be associated with those type of programs. They're too prideful, like I said, to accept things. And it's just about learning how to tell them it doesn't necessarily mean you're poor. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you can't take care of yourself. It's about explaining how it can benefit them in more ways than it negatively impacts them.
All right. Ashley, go ahead. I don't know if you want to expand upon that a little bit because Miss Jimenez has kind of gotten into it already, but feel free to alter your question a little bit if you want to.
My question was, what advice would you give to someone who's in your specific type of field? I don't know how else to phrase it.
Advice as far as like how to be successful in here, or just any advice in general?
Probably how to deal with like the stresses of some of the emotional toll it takes on you.
Yeah, it can definitely be an emotional game. My advice definitely would be to try not to get attached to cases. That is way easier said than done. There are stories or situations where it's just devastating. It's heartbreaking. I've dealt with families who have like their parents who really struggle to take care of themselves, and they basically will tell me, well, that's not my problem. These are your parents, and granted, you don't know everybody's upbringing and whatever, but when your parents are in a state where they can't take care of themselves, and you kind of just say, I don't want anything to do with them, and then just kind of throw them to us. But then you want their house when they die, and you want their money when they die. Like those are situations where I struggle because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So the emotional checking is important. You have to make sure you're just not getting attached to things, because like I said, you will carry it with you home, and you think about it, and it itches at you every day. There are still cases that I've carried because I've gotten too close with them when I worked at Human Services, and they itch at me every day because I can't help them in the way I used to be able to. And they know me, so they will reach out and they'll ask questions, and I'm like, all I can do is point you a direction. I can't help you in the way that I used to be able to help you. So I would say just try not to get as emotionally attached to a specific case or a person. It's really hard to not do that, especially when you're a people person like me. I sympathize and I get emotional pretty quickly. Another reason why I joined this field was simply because my grandfather didn't have that type of access to care that he needed. And he just thought it was because he didn't qualify for a lot of things. And by the time we found somebody to tell us what he did have for entitlement as far as his benefits and insurance, it was already too late. He was already too far progressed in his sickness. And I was a kid. I was maybe about 12 when he died. So that watching him go through a process like that, because my mom and I took care of him, that's really what kind of pushed me into a field where I can help people every day. And that's why I really enjoyed this field, because I see my grandfather in a lot of these cases. So it makes me feel really good to be able to say I helped someone in a similar situation that we were in when I was a kid.
That's awesome, having that personal connection. Okay, so we have 3 more questions that we'll get through before we log off, if that's okay. Erica,
Gotcha.
Go ahead.
Have you ever experienced any ethical conflicts as a financial social worker?
Yes, all the time. The biggest ethical one I would say is that when you have a client who's right on the cusp of qualifying for something, We can't tell them how to spend money. We can't tell them what to do with their money. We're not allowed to tell them. Basically, all we can do is tell them the rules. We can't persuade them in any way, shape, or form to do something differently. If they do it on their own accord, that's fine. But I can't say, hey, you're $5 over this limit. You need to spend that $5 and then bring me the statement back again. I can't do that. So when we're on the cusp like that, where you're looking at a $5 difference, it's hard to not be able to say, oh, just go grab a bag of chips and a soda and then come back and give me this. We ethically can't do that. So we face that all the time. And like I said, the other one is just that being able to separate the emotional from the facts. Sometimes you get caught up in the emotions of a case and you're not looking at the facts anymore. So you have to be consistent with looking at those facts.
That's a tough place to be in. Taylor, go ahead.
So my question is, was there ever a situation where a patient could not get insurance or medical help at all? If so, what was the most you could do to help them?
Yeah, we see it pretty often where people have like too much money and they have to self-pay for things, which is normally the route people end up going. We've had instances where we have had people who have like, you know, $900,000 in their bank account and, you know, other assets. They own multiple houses and stuff like that. So in those instances, it's really hard to help because they have such an abundance of money or access to things like that. We normally try to get them on some type of privatized insurance, or most people who have money like that can self-pay for a while and pay for their own care, which here in Colorado, if you did like my program where it's all encompassing every month, it's about $8,000 a month. And that's, you know, so if you have that type of money sitting around, we can talk about that option. But for the most part, a lot of people don't have that type of money. But yeah, they're either looking at paying for it by themselves or we get them some type of privatized insurance. But even then, that can be really expensive. So it's kind of just weighing the costs.
Okay. And our last question is Dylan. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, so you said that your pay could increase like $5 for knowing sign language. Like, what other skills could like increase your pay like that?
So being bilingual or trilingual, any type of other language other than English, that can definitely bump you. In my role particularly, I am considered a salary employee, so I do not get paid by the hour. I have a set pay that I get every month, but definitely the language. I would also say that if you have experience, like I said, as a nurse, or another big one that we see with the differential in pay is if you were like a supervisor, for example, in a different area. Like for me, I work for human services. One of the other people I worked with, he used to be a supervisor for human services. So based on your experience, your pay scale can change completely. It just depends on what type of experience you have and bring to the table, but definitely the language, someone who can also be willing to travel to mountain towns in our job. That is a big thing that not a lot of people like to do. They don't want to drive through the mountains. They don't want to drive. Even for us, like we have a center in a town called Pueblo, and it's about a good 3 or 4 hour drive. Not many people want to drive that. And it's not a very pretty drive. It's different. The mountains I like driving through because they're really pretty. Pueblo is really flat and you also don't have any service. So you can't even really listen to like your Spotify or anything on there. So it's a pretty boring trip and not a lot of people like that. So
All right, awesome. And I just wanted to ask before we end the call, is your company in New Jersey?
Nope. So my company is based in Colorado. The main corporate office is here in Colorado. From my understanding, the foundation started here, but they broke ground on a facility in California before they did here. So it's just, I don't know. And I don't understand that. I think it was just cheaper to build out there first. And yeah, but everything is corporate here, main office here. I technically work in the corporate office, but with everything going on, we can't really work there. COVID's really put an impact on that life. So it's changing. I just had my first vaccine shot last week, as we are required to get vaccinated. And then I go at the end of the month to get my second shot. And I had to drive 3 hours away just to get a vaccine because they're so limited here. A lot of our mountain towns have them. So I had to drive 3 hours last week on Wednesday just to get my COVID shot. And then I have to drive back again at the end of the month up to this mountain town, which I'm praying it does not snow. When it snows here, it's actually supposed to snow starting Thursday and the rest of the week. But into the weekend, it can be a lot of snow, and I am terrified of it. I do not like to drive in the snow. I like sledding in the snow. I like skiing in the snow, but I do not like driving in the snow. So I'm hoping it doesn't snow then.
Good luck. Oh, and I had one more question. I'm sorry, before you log off. Do you know if your company saw a big difference in the number of people seeking care when they legalized marijuana?
Yes and no. So we offer services where they can obtain what's called a medical card. So here in Colorado, they legalize both recreational and medicinal marijuana. The recreational, you have to be 21 and older, and it's also not the same type of strength that medicinal marijuana is. So we can help people get their medicinal cards. You have to have a documented illness. It's kind of a few steps you have to go through. Your doctor has to approve it and everything else. No, it's crazy because with the the legalization, it did change a lot of things. All it did was kind of add more paperwork to doctors and healthcare providers. I think the benefits outweigh a lot of the negatives, and it's a great alternative for people. Especially for those who don't technically believe in like the modern medicine type of life. We get that a lot where people are like, I'm not putting that in my body. So they'd rather go with something a little different, which is fine. And we've had the opposite effect with COVID. Not a lot of people want to change their doctors and providers right now, or move their information from one place to another. So it's been on the reversal. When marijuana was legalized, our numbers went up. And then when COVID happened, our numbers went down. But the good thing is no one has lost their job since COVID in my company. We've had no employee deaths with COVID. And we've only had, I know in Colorado at least, only 10 of our participants pass away from COVID. So we tend to be pretty safe here. We take a lot of precautions, and obviously like with the vaccine, we are on that top tier list to get that.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking your time to speak with us.
Of course.
And you guys, I will see you guys tomorrow. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.